We are recording live in another micro lesson for microbats. This is on data management, part 1. It's actually part 1A and B. And the reason it's part A is because sometimes, as they say, it just happens. So, data management, part 1. Metadata is almost always your first step with your data management. What is metadata? Well, that's what tells you, and people looking at your file, what am I, where was I, and when was I there? And additionally, metadata will tell you who did the recording, and in some cases, how the data was recorded, including the equipment. However, before you even begin to look at a new bat call set of data recordings, to even look at what species are there, because you'll spend the bulk of your time on the who part trying to figure out what the species are. It's critical that you've backed up or made a copy of all your original data files. Data loss is never a question of if, it's always a question of when. A drive fails, you have a power outage or surge, you hit the wrong key, your cat stepped on the keyboard, or what have you. Stage 1 with data denial. It did not just lose my data, and you kind of look bewildered. Stage 2, the confirmation. Did I? And then the acceptance. Well, it happens. So for all subsequent steps, you will be working on a copy, not the original data. Your original will be safe on another drive. It is possible to corrupt your original data, and keep in mind it's irreplaceable. You can never go back to the same field site and recreate the same conditions to collect the same data, regardless how much money you throw at it. Once backed up, the most important thing to do is add the metadata that's associated with each call file. And this is before you add the species IDs, excuse me, you need to add all of the location information and who did the recording. Once you have that and you're convinced and comfortable everything is fine as is, then use that data set to overwrite the original backup. So now you have a backup of the original data with the metadata included. So if there's any other glitches or problems while you're adding species identifications, you're not going back to square one that you have to start all over again. So it's important to realize each one of your acoustic files serves as a voucher file. And the moment you've recorded it, it then documents what was at the location, when was it at the location, where the location was, and specifically who was doing the recording. When I'm collaborating with people and they're sharing files, they often lack metadata. Although there may be an Excel or text file table associated with the files, they may be only linked by dates or file names. That's often not useful. Including metadata in each file is essential for linking important details with each file. For your work, you may even be moving selected files to other folders as you identify species and move them to different locations, possibly separating them from any list that you may have in that folder with the location data. Once they're separated from that folder, there's no longer location data associated with the files. So it's critical you embed that in each and every file. While you may remember next week where you recorded the bats this week, 2 months from now, 2 years from now, perhaps not. And if you're recording a lot of data, which I hope you will be doing, you will have hundreds of thousands of files, and trust me, you will not remember where each and every one was recorded. Even when including Excel files with the dates and location data, it may not be possible to match and determine which call files are linked to a discrete location in any notes if it's not included in the file itself, because file names are often duplicated when multiple detectors are deployed over the same dates in the same study areas. Recorded files may be used and shared between multiple individuals for projects, potential publications, and of course, species ID reference files. And even in some cases, you may submit them to iNaturalist, but without the metadata, they're virtually useless. In such cases, when files are separated, they no longer have the associated data. So it really is important that you add the metadata with the locations before you begin adding identifications. In some cases, files that I've received have been renamed with a species name. So they've got a molluscid they've recorded and they rename the file UMOPS. Well, that would not be considered best practices because this does not add the species ID to the actual call file. All this does is like changing the address on an envelope while keeping the contents inside that you need to convey to somebody unchanged. It does not change the ID within the species file. It only changes the name of the file, and that's not a good practice. There are a number of growing online call repositories, each destined to become a call sharing platform. Many of these, at least at the moment, do not require metadata to be embedded within the uploaded files, but they provide internal database links to each file. Problem is, when these files are separated from the metadata link and downloaded as a reference file, all of that linkage is lost. That's going to be changing. There's a whole new program about to be launched out of Australia that's going to be a global backcall repository. More on that at a later date. The critical location data is no longer associated with call files when they're transferred out of such repositories without embedded metadata. Keep in mind, this would be like the equivalent of a mammal curator, taking the tags off of all the specimens before they send you a loan of material for a taxonomic review. You would have no idea where these specimens came from, even though the identifications in the box they came in may be 100% correct. It doesn't do you much good. There are many similar looking back calls, and as taxa are clarified by recent molecular work, species limits are becoming clear. Without location data, recorded call files may be assumed to be showing geographic variation in big quotes versus distinctive species-specific vocal signature difference. An example would be two species that were once considered the same. For example, the difference in two small mormolopids, Pteronodus personatus and Pteronodus psilotus. At one time, they were all considered personatus. Now we know all records from northern Central America are psilotus, everything from southern America, South America is personatus. Now there are some zones of overlap in this area here. Same thing with Pteronodus davii and fulvus. If you're looking at older data that was recorded prior to these splits, the taxonomy can be updated based on the identification of the location alone. so the location information is critical. When metadata is included in each file, there's rarely a question of when or where it was recorded. Guano, well, it's more than just bat poop. And as we said, it happens. However, in this case, guano is our friend. Guano is the Grand Unified Acoustic Notation Ontology. This is the commonly used format for including metadata and bat call files in all the current bat recording equipment and software. Not things like Raven, but all the bat call software, Sonobat, Bat Sound, Kaleidoscope, Anabat, all of these include the guano metadata format. If you're wanting to be into a nerd and delve into the guano specifications, there's a link there. You can look that up and read about the details. But it's not only critical, it was so important that all the manufacturers of the equipment and the software people have included it. So don't ignore adding it to your data. In addition to the species identification, a key part of the metadata is simply documenting the existence of a bat at a particular place and time. Who recorded it, of course, is important if there are future questions about the data, and in some cases there may be questions about what equipment was used. All the most modern equipment automatically includes the equipment brand and type and settings that were used to record the data in the guano metadata. Again, keeping in mind your acoustic records are voucher files, just like a specimen of a plant pressed in a national herbarium or a bat skeleton, skull, and skin in a local museum. It is the voucher that documents critical information on when and where that bat was found. For conservation, to paraphrase Eldridge, we cannot begin to protect a species until we first know of its existence. And we need to know where it was existing in order to start formulating conservation actions. If you don't have that included in your metadata, your data is going to be very, very limited in use. So, if you're paying attention, aside from adding metadata as your first step, it's actually your second step. Making the backup copy is your first step. Without your metadata, acoustic files are nearly as useless as specimens added to a museum or herbarium without details. Even if the IDs are 100% correct, no idea where, when, or who did the recording. I've repeated this over in this little micro session a number of times because it's critical. Why is it important? Well, the detailed locations are extremely important. Here's an example of looking at museum collection data from Belize from the Global Biodiversity Information Collection database. When complete location details are lacking, users of the data make their best guess of where the data were recorded. This can lead to many misinterpretations, and for conservation, this is really important. As an example, there are 46 bat species specimen records that are museum collection records that include a location called Blue Creek within Belize. The metadata on some of these did not include detail. It only included Blue Creek and, of course, the country Belize, without coordinates or other details. When the details are lacking, best guess of where the bats were recorded can lead to misinterpretations. In this case, the museum personnel assumed that the most prominent Blue Creek location would be correct. Keep in mind that location names, as in most countries, many places, place names may refer to multiple locations. This is the case in Belize. Here's the country of Belize. This would be Mexico, Guatemala down here, and this is the Caribbean, just for you that don't understand Belize geography. But the two place names are separated by nearly 200 kilometers. Belize is a long, narrow country. If we look at the northern village of Blue Creek, it's a Mennonite community, predominantly surrounded by mechanized agriculture and rice. So, more or less scorched earth. And this little piece here actually is Mexico on the other side of the Rio Hondo. So, this is very far north. In the southern part of the country, all the way down south, Blue Creek is a small Maya community, predominantly surrounded by tropical evergreen broadleaf hill forests. So, the differences between these are quite striking. So, of the 46 locations records for Blue Creek, 5 were assigned by the museum people to the Northern Mennonite community, which is obviously incorrect. Of these species, at least 2 are only found in mostly intact forest and especially caves like the threatened Balaniopteryx io. Those collection tags only included Blue Creek as the location name, without any coordinates or further details such as district. If you were going to complete a conservation risk assessment, like I did for the bats of Belize in 2019 and 2022, incorrect locations could have led to misleading information for the government on where species of conservation concern actually were. So, for your acoustic data, always remember your records are vouchers for what, where, when, and who. Add the metadata before you begin adding IDs. Your data will always be robust and valuable for yourself over time and others who may be relying on your data to make ecological and conservation decisions. In the case of recordings that do not have metadata or in early days without GPS, you can always go back and edit the data. And one of the micro lessons will review the use of AnalogW, which makes it very easy to manage metadata for your call files, and that'll be covered separately later. Many early recording devices did not include built-in GPS like they do now, but you can derive these for your metadata. If you have GIS capabilities, you can georeference locations, like here in Blue Creek, the field station. You know where it is from your field notes. You can derive the coordinates from that. However, more recent tools that are easier to use is Google Earth. Figure out where you were, put a marker on it, and there you have your coordinates for you to add to your metadata. For coordinates, we use decimal degrees with the base datum of WGS84. In addition to the details that help others find the locations in the future, if you have the coordinates in there, it'll always point to exactly where it was. Some people are using vague or ephemeral location names, such as Juan's Farm, Toledo District, Belize. That may sound really good to you now. You may know Juan. He may be the uncle of your wife or your brother or somebody you've met at some point. However, 10 years from now, will Juan still have that farm? Will anybody know who Juan is? So it's important to include details of where that was, such as 5.6 kilometers south of some town on the east side of the highway. That way you have details where it can be found in the future. The reason for using decimal degrees and WGS84 base datum means your data then can be used in Google Earth or any GIS without reprojecting and working on projections, which sometimes can distort where locations actually are. Also, data sets must have a unique location name. Two sets from the same field outing spanning a week could have locations noted as this. In this, I used CRFR Expedition for the Columbia River Forest River Expedition. However, over the week's expedition, I was at two different locations. I do have GPS coordinates included in there along with altitude. However, if each data set uses the same location name, but they're two distinct locations, a database or any other search will not find these as individual locations. So just using this as your location in your metadata is not adequate, even if you have coordinates. You need to add some other defining character. In this case, Camp 1, Camp 2. Then immediately each data set is unique. Another example from a quick 10-night cave survey at Runaway Creek Preserve, a private protected area in Belize, has a lot of caves, and there were cave surveys done there. One of the early data sets simply was listing Runaway Creek Caves as the location. Well, it looks like they're geographically three different caves, and they're actually quite widely separated. Now, if you use unique cave names for each data set, then you know exactly what cave the species came from and which one may or may not warrant protection. So always create a backup, add the metadata to your files before any other processing, and you'll be acknowledged as embracing robust science. So from now on, I'm counting on you to make sure guano does happen, not just the unplanned holy guano, I just lost my data happening. So make sure guano happens for you. Thank you.